тебе ті чари, я без тебе всі дні у полоні печалі. Може, десь у лісах ти чарділя шукала, сонце руту знайшла і мене зчарувала. Червону руту не шукай вечорами, ти у мене єдина, тільки ти повір. Бо твоя врода, то є чистая вода, то є бистрая вода синих гір. Я тебе в снах, у дібровах зелених, по забутих стежках, ти приходиш до мене, і не треба нести мені квітку надії, бо давно уже ти увійшла в мої мрії. Червону руту не шукай вечорами, ти у мене єдина, тільки ти повір. Бо твоя врода, твоя чистая вода, твоя бистрая вода синих гір. Шукай вечорами, ти у мене єдина, тільки ти повір. Бо твоя врода, то є чистая вода, то є бистрая вода синих гір. Червону руту не шукай вечорами, ти у мене єдина, тільки ти повір. Бо твоя врода, то є чистая вода, то є бистрая вода синих гір. Червона рута, рута!
And the Green Band from New York City with an Eva Suk classic Червона рута, The Red Rue. Добрий день, шановні радіослухачі, та вітаю вас всіх на радіопередачу «Наш Холос» радіо українського коріння, яка подається вам на хвилі CHLY 101,7 FM у місті Nanaimo. При мікрофоні цю годину є Павліна, а наступну годину буде з вами Оксана. Дякую, що рішили перебути з нами наступних 2 годин. Ми маємо дуже цікаві новини на сьогоднішній програмі. Hello there and welcome to Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio, coming to you from CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. I'm Paulette Demchik-McQuarrie, Pukrinska Pavlina, and I'm your host for this first hour. Oksana will be along at 12 noon to host the show in Ukrainian. I'm delighted to have you with us. We've got a great program lined up for you. In this hour, the focus will be on a momentous event that occurred here in British Columbia last week for the Ukrainian community and the whole province. And it is the long-awaited passage of the Holodomor Memorial Day Act. As well, we've got our usual proverb of the week, other items of interest, and great Ukrainian music. And coming up next is Kvika Sisik, also from New York, and Dete Teper, Where Are You Now?
тобою всю ніч ми. Згадка прощання, перші признання, де тепер вони. Ми гадали, зустрічі ждали, та пройшли ті дні. Ти сказав, і в час біди дружби такої ніхто не зітре. Землі довга розлука, віддалі мука, ти в душі завжди. Дай побореш, все покинеш, прийдеш знов сюди. Відгукнись, де ти в цей час. Знаю, ти згадував горі мене не раз. Весняні ночі здали коротші, тільки не для нас. Все промине, вдаль полине, наш любимий вальс. Наш любимий вальс.
and the Canadian Bandura Kapella with a traditional Ukrainian folk song Rozprahajte Chlapci Koni on Harness the Horses Boys. Up next is Molodzy from Winnipeg with a song about Ukrainian immigration to Canada, Hop Shoop Canada.
Яка ти зрадлива, не одного мужа жона розлучила, не одного мужа жона розлучила. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви сілуяйте. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви сілуяйте. Ой, не їдьми, милий, до Канади жити, лише ж тіточками будемо бідити, лише ж тіточками будемо бідити. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви сілуяйте. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви сілуяйте. Ой, приходь мій рідний, старенька я мати, бо чи вас я буду ще колись видати, бо чи вас я буду ще колись видати. Дайте кабаніба, батьку мармуляди, бувайте здорові, іду до Канади, бувайте здорові, іду до Канади. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви всі гуляйте. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви всі гуляйте. Дайте кабаніба, пачку маргарини, бувайте здорові, іду до Марини, бувайте здорові, іду до Марини. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви всі гуляйте. Музиченьки, грайте, а ви всі гуляйте. Обшук Канада, українська громада, музиченьки, грайте, а ви всі гуляйте.
Ukrainian Jewish Heritage is a bi-weekly series sponsored by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter based in Toronto, featuring stories of Ukrainians and Jews working together in solidarity and harmony to restore and strengthen centuries-old bonds and affinities nearly destroyed by hostile outside forces in the bloody 20th century and even today. Tune in next week for another episode of Ukrainian Jewish Heritage, brought to you by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter here on Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio. On Tuesday, October 29, 2019, the government of the province of British Columbia passed Bill M-225, the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act. This act officially establishes the fourth Saturday of November as Holodomor Memorial Day, joining the federal government and the governments of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec in this acknowledgement. The act was introduced as a private member's bill by Dr. Andrew Weaver, head of the Green Party of British Columbia and MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head in Victoria. The bill was passed unanimously. Last Tuesday, a reception was held at the BC Legislature in Victoria, at which Dr. Andrew Weaver spoke. Also speaking were Andrei Shevchenko, the ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, and the president of the Vancouver branch of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Natalia Yatskevich. Other dignitaries who attended included other MLAs, Alexander Danilenko, Consul General of Ukraine to Edmonton, Mr. Alexei Lyashenko, Counselor with the Embassy, Lubomir Hutsulak, Honorary Consul of Ukraine at Vancouver, and members of BC's Ukrainian community. The Luna Ensemble of Victoria sang 3 sacred and solemn hymns in memory of the victims of the Holodomor. The first one, which you just heard, was A Prayer of Forgiveness, Rozbinek, taken from the New Testament story of the thief on the cross who asked Christ to forgive his sins. They also sang the Beatitudes, with an emphasis on the verse calling for justice. And finally, a rendition of the traditional Ukrainian hymn of mourning, Vichnaya Pamyat, Memory Eternal, arranged by Edmonton composer Roman Soltykevich. After the formalities, my colleague Oksana Poberezhnik and I had a chance to circulate a bit and chat with attendees and some of the dignitaries, including Andrew Weaver.
Well, we're at the legislature in Victoria just after the passing of a bill that...
Bill M-225, the Holodomor Memorial Day Act.
Thank you. And that was Andrew Weaver, Green Party leader and MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head. And you were instrumental in getting this bill passed that is going to memorialize the Holodomor the fourth Saturday of every November.
Yes, that's correct. I brought it in as a private member's bill. I gave notice of that last spring, worked to build all-party consensus to support it, was in touch with the ambassador's office, and here we have today a monumental day for me and my family to see this bill come through and pass unanimously in the House, recognizing the fourth Saturday of November as Holodomor Memorial Day.
Now, you grew up in a Ukrainian family, so you knew about this in your history.
Yes, my Baba indeed, they wouldn't talk about it. It was something that they experienced, and I obviously saw them quite often. But it was through my mother, my uncle Oleg, and my mother's Lyudmila, my uncle Oleg, and my uncle Bogdan Kravchenko that I was able to piece together bits and pieces of the story. So I was very aware growing up. My mother would speak to me in Ukrainian. My mother would read poems about Ukraine, and so through my life I've known about it. My uncle Bogdan was a Ukrainian scholar at the University of Alberta and written about it, and so this is very personal to me, and so I'm so pleased it passed today.
It's amazing to me that I found out about this, your background, only today listening to yesterday's speeches in the legislature. Yeah. And it's amazing. You don't know who you're walking by in the street or who you're watching on TV who has this kind of an incredible history.
Well, that's right. My father is John Weaver, and he met my mother, Lyudmila Kravchenko, at the Mohila Institute at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. They met and got married in, I believe, 1960. At the time, women changed names. It's not so common now. So there's Weavers and Smiths and Taylors all across this nation who have Ukrainian heritage, and it's only because of the historical women taking the name of their husband that it's not clearly identifiable. But I clearly feel like a Kravchenko inside me, and if you look at me, I look Ukrainian too.
You absolutely do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We also caught up with Devin Goldie, president and co-founder of the UVic Ukrainian Student Society. Devin is pursuing her master's degree in applied theater and Slavic studies with a focus on Ukrainian immigration to Canada. She's also a board member for the Ukrainian Canadian Cultural Society of Vancouver Island and the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Victoria branch.
Okay, we've got Devin with us here.
Hi, yes, my name is Devin Sarita Goldie, and I am the president of the UVic Ukrainian Student Society and the vice president of SUSC, the Ukrainian Canadian Students Union.
Now, Devin, we first met last spring when the Holodomor van was out here at the traveling museum, I guess. Yeah. And you had a great show. I think was it a little bit surprising for you, the interest?
It was great. I was expecting that there would be a decent turnout because the bus is so prominent and so noticeable, but I wasn't expecting it to be as successful as it was. We had a couple thousand people come by and actually go into the bus and check it out. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was very successful.
And so now we have today this momentous day. It's been a long time coming, and we have now Holodomor recognition, or I guess memorialization of the, I guess commemoration is the right word, on the last Saturday of the month. So do you have anything planned, any of those people that you might have met and they found out first about Holodomor through the bus? Are you in contact with any of them, or will you be pursuing anything further?
Yes, we will actually. We are hosting what we're calling a Holodomor Awareness Week at the university, and that will be from November 25th to 30th. And the goal is to further interact with people that we met from the bus, but also to bring new people in who haven't heard about the Holodomor yet. We really want to work on educating the students, staff, and faculty. So we're going to be having 2 different days where we'll have an information booth set up at the quad, both the Monday and the Wednesday, where students and staff and faculty will be able to come up and learn about the Holodomor. But in addition to that, we're also hosting a documentary night on Tuesday the 26th at the university from 7 to 8:30, where we'll be showing a new documentary about the Holodomor and specifically Ria Kleiman. It was actually the new documentary that was shown on the Holodomor bus. So we'll be hosting that, and Dr. Serhiy Yakelchik will be doing an introductory speech for us. And we're also in the process of organizing a food tasting. And when I say food, I mean using the recipes that the survivors used when they lived through the Holodomor. It's an interactive activity that was developed by the Holodomor National Awareness Tour staff, and it's only been done at the University of Toronto so far. They essentially developed 3 different recipes that are actually real recipes that people used using bark, roots, and hay, I think. And there's pancakes as one, tea is the other. I don't recall the third offhand. But essentially, we're going to give people the opportunity to actually physically experience what a lot of people during the Holodomor had to do on a daily basis to survive. And I think the beauty of it is that it's so interactive, and it really puts you in the shoes of the survivors. It's one thing just to talk about or read about the Holodomor, but to actually try to eat a pancake made out of bark is a whole different experience. So we're still working out the fine details on that in terms of where and when, but that's being sponsored by the Holodomor National Awareness Tour, and we're very excited about that.
Wow, that is exciting, and for sure. So you'll be in touch with us to let us know.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and how can people, if they want to be proactive and want to follow you, how can they keep up with what you're doing and keep up on the the finalization of these events?
The best way to keep in touch with us is through our Facebook page. We have a Facebook page called UVic Ukrainian Student Society. We post all of our events on there. We also have an Instagram, which is also UVic Ukrainian Student Society. And on our Facebook page, there's actually a link to sign up for our email newsletter. And so we send out a newsletter every couple of weeks with the exact details about events and things like that. So if people want to have that information coming to their inbox, they can sign up for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Devin.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Wysłuchajcie radioprogramu Nash Holos Radio Ukrainskiego Korіння на радіостанції CHLY 101.7 FM у місті Nanaimo. Говорить Pavlina. You're listening to Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. I'm your host this hour, Pavlina. And more from Andrew Weaver and the passage of Bill M-225.
Introduction of bills.
Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I move that a bill entitled Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act 2019, of which order has been given in my name on the order paper, be introduced and read a first time now. I'm pleased to be introducing this bill that would establish the fourth Saturday in November as Holodomor Memorial Day throughout British Columbia. The term Holodomor is derived from the words Morite Holodom, meaning extermination by hunger. During Holodomor, between 3 and 5 million Ukrainians died as a result of a deliberate and politically motivated famine in 1932 and 33. This bill, if passed, would allow the fourth Saturday in November to be memorialized by the legislature as Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day. Canada is home to the world's third largest Ukrainian population behind Ukraine and Russia, with an estimated 1.36 million Ukrainian Canadians living across our country. Among them are members of my family, and in my family's case, as part of the collectivization of farms, my deed was shipped to northern Russia. My Ukrainian mother, Ludmila, now lives here in Victoria with my father. In this tabling, I would also like to recognize the Minister of Jobs, Trade and Technology for his continued efforts to have Holodomor recognized in the House.
The question is first reading of the bill. You've heard the question. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried. Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You've heard the question. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Andrew Weaver calling for Bill M-225 to be passed in BC's legislature. And now here is Andrew Weaver with his personal story of his family members who survived the Holodomor and the horrors of World War II in Ukraine. He shared this story in the BC legislature on Monday, October 28th, along with the second reading of Bill M-225, the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act.
Recognizing the leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I move that Bill M-225 be now read a second time. It gives me great pleasure to rise and speak at second reading to Bill M-225, the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act. As I noted upon introducing the bill at first reading, the term Holodomor is derived from the words Morite Holodom, meaning extermination by hunger. During Holodomor, between 3 and 5 million Ukrainians died as a result of a deliberate and politically motivated famine in 1932 to 33. This bill, if passed, would allow the fourth Saturday in November to be memorialized by the legislature as Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day. Canada is home to the world's third largest Ukrainian population behind Ukraine and Russia, with an estimated 1.36 million Ukrainian Canadians living across the country, and among them are members of my family. Please let me expand upon the importance of memorializing this horrific tragedy through the narrative of my own family's experiences in the Ukraine. I'm profoundly grateful, Honourable Speaker, to my uncle, Bogdan Kravchenko, who was born in December 1946, shortly after the Second World War, in a refugee camp in the American zone of southern Germany, for helping me with our family's history during and after and before the Holodomor. Tiako Bogdan was director of the Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies at the University of Alberta for many years before moving to the Ukraine in 1991. There he became director of policy studies at the Council of Advisors to the newly constituted Parliament of Ukraine after Ukraine declared its independence on August the 24th, 1991. Bogdan Kravchenko is presently the Dean of the Graduate School of Development at the University of Central Asia in Kyrgyzstan, where he also served as Director General from 2007 to 2014. Honourable Speaker, my grandfather on my mother's side, Alexander Kravchenko, immigrated to Canada in late 1950, arriving in Montreal with $5 in his pocket and with a family of 4 waiting in France to join him. Within a half a year or so, being a good welder, and I'll come back to that, he had saved up enough money to pay for the transatlantic passage that brought everyone, including my mother, to Montreal. Born in a small village in Dniepropetrovsk, eastern Ukraine in 1914, he survived the offensives and counteroffensives during the 1917-20 Ukrainian Revolution, the Stalin collectivization, the famine, repressions, and the horrors of the Second World War. He often reminded his children, including my mother, that he was one of the fortunate ones. Most people like him didn't make it. The Soviet regime was not established in Ukraine until 1919 after 3 attempts. At the end of 1918, the Bolshevik Party in Ukraine had only 5,000 members in a country of 29 million people, and Soviet power depended entirely on Red Army forces from Russia. In 1919, the Bolsheviks implemented devastating agricultural policies of collectivization and forceful grain requisitions that led to the 1921 famine that claimed the lives of 1 million people and proved to be a dress rehearsal for a far more ominous famine a decade later. It implemented the new economic policy in 1921, NEP, as it's popularly called, a more market-oriented economic policy to foster economic growth. That allowed private individuals to own small enterprises, but its biggest impact was on the countryside, abandoning the much-hated collectivization and allowing private holdings, including a relatively sane tax policy, instead of forceful confiscation. Agriculture production increased. 70% of peasants were members of cooperatives. There were huge leaps in educational achievement. The urban economy expanded, and the Ukrainian countryside had one of the world's highest birth rates. All of this came to an end when Stalin decided on rapid industrialization that meant forced collectivization. That is, the abolition of private holding and forcing peasants into state-controlled collective farms for the simple reason that it was easier this way to extract enormous surpluses through outright confiscation. Honourable Speaker, the fact that agricultural production plunged was not at issue as long as the surpluses could be extracted. I should note as a little sidebar here that this same catastrophic policy was also pursued by Mao Zedong, Stalin's disciple in the Great Leap Forward from 1957 to 60 that resulted in 30 million deaths in China. The country, in China that is, recovered under Deng Xiaoping, who was also greatly influenced by the experience of the new economic policy, the NEP, in his reforms built on in Ukraine. Ukraine was always viewed by the Russian Bolsheviks as something of an El Dorado, with its rich black soil whose agricultural produce was there for the taking. But it had a troublesome peasantry, with its strong self-organization, village committees, cooperatives, and so on, that also served as a social base of the national idea. If only it could be brought to heel, broken, then the rapacious policies would encounter little resistance. My great-grandfather, Ustim Kravchenko, was part of the large base of the natural leadership of village society that had to be removed. He had seen the world, having sailed some 20,000 nautical miles as an army conscript, from Petersburg around the Cape of Good Hope to the land in the Far East to participate in one of the last battles of the 1905 Russo-Japanese War. He was stirred by the Ukrainian Revolution, and during the 1920s, under the new economic plan, he was active in village life, and in 1925, a founder of the Village Improvement Society from his village. There were 9 children in his family, and the parents scrimped to send the eldest 3 boys to institutions of higher education. The family was sustained by a farm of some 5 hectares. As Stalin moved towards collectivization in 1927, there was a large tax increase on the middle and high-income peasants. The vast majority of peasants in Ukraine were middle peasants, holding somewhere between 4 and 7 hectares of land. That year, at a meeting of the village council, recalling that at this time these councils played a very significant role in the governing of villages, Ustim criticized this measure, arguing that it would lower incentives of peasant households to generate surpluses. The village council supported his position and voted against the tax increase. A few days later, Soviet security services arrested him, and he spent half a year in prison. Ustím was released in May 1928, the year Stalin declared industrialization and the first step of collectivization. The onslaught of the Ukrainian peasantry began with the so-called dekulakization campaign that involved ridding the countryside of its most productive strata and its natural leadership. The aim was, and I quote, the liquidation of kulaks as a class. Their property was to be confiscated, and one group was to be imprisoned in concentration camps or shot. The other deported to Siberia or northern Russia, and the third resettled in another location. My family fell in the second category. On March the 5th, 1930, a dekulakization brigade comprising party activists, the OGPU, that's the forerunner of the KGB, and urban residents descended on the village and ordered the family out of the house and took them to be loaded on a crowded cattle wagon headed for the woodlands of northern Russia, the Vologda region. Aboard was Ustím, age 50, his wife 41, and 5 of the youngest of the 9 children who were at home at the time. My grandfather, Alexander, who was 15, and four girls, aged 11, twins aged 8, and a 5-year-old. After some 2 weeks on the cattle wagon, Honourable Speaker, they were deposited in Vologda, where it was still winter. Women and children were separated from able-bodied men and herded into a church. Conditions were appalling. There was 1 loaf of bread for 18 people. Children started to die en masse. The mortality rate was so high that the camp commander petitioned authorities to allow children under the age of 15 to be sent to their relatives and friends. The 4 girls, my great-aunts, the eldest being 11, were put on a train alone and sent to Dnepropetrovsk in Ukraine into the care of one of their elder brothers, my great-uncle, Dyako Vasil, a 21-year-old engineering student at the time. Ustím, their father, was driven into the woods to work to fell trees. It was winter and he was half barefooted since his boots were torn and there were only 1 pair. In a letter to Vasil, he wrote, and I quote, "We are doomed here to a gradual death from starvation. We are told here that a bullet is worth more than any one of us, the exiled. So you altogether must take care of your sisters and brothers to save them and lead them on the path that your parents put you on. I myself am destined to find a grave in the woods of Vologda Governorate." He quoted a poem written by one of his fellow exiles from the Odessa region of the Ukraine. "When I remember Ukraine, my heart sinks. Cry, children of Ukraine, grow up in tears, and one day we will cry and sing and rejoice together." As a side note, in 1930, before the fully blown apparatus of repression was established, people wrote these letters where they expressed themselves in a manner that would be simply unthinkable a few years later. My great-uncle Vasil collected 22 such letters he received from various members of our family, burning the originals after transcribing them into school notebooks. He clung to them when the Germans took him from Ukraine during the Second World War as forced labor, where he remained after the war. My grandfather and his mother escaped the Vologda region. With the young girls gone, the authorities decided to move them to where the men were working in the woods. There was no place to live, no food, and they lived on the street. There was only one way out, to flee. It was an epic journey of almost 1,500 kilometers. My grandfather was 15 years old as he wrote in a letter to his brother Vasil, "If a runaway is caught, he or she is arrested. A Ukrainian is easily distinguished from a Russian. I learnt to speak their tongue and got a Russian jacket and dressed mother in a Russian sarafan," which is the national dress. His mother had to pretend to be deaf and dumb since she didn't know Russian. They slept in the woods or haylofts and begged for food. There was a dramatic moment on the journey when they reached the river Sukona that they had to cross. As they waited, as grandfather wrote, and I quote, "The militia came, they sat in the boat, and I pleaded them to take us across. I thought we were caught, but they only asked," and I quote, "Where are you going?" "To work," I said, and they didn't react at all. By the end of 1930, they made it to Ukraine, to Vasil's cramped quarters, and my grandfather was about to turn 16. Imagine that. He was just 15 when he made the 1,500 trek on foot with his mother. 1,500-kilometer trek on foot. They couldn't stay in Dnepropetrovsk as escapees. They would be punished. My grandfather did what thousands of other runaways did. He fled to the eastern cities of Ukraine, where industrialization created a massive demand for labor. The industrial centers were a cauldron. You could lie about where you came from, and in this period there was no way authorities could quickly verify the information. He worked on a massive construction site, the building of the Dnieper hydroelectric dam, just outside Zaporizhia, carrying heavy drills up scaffolding at the age of 16. Then he moved deeper into the industrial heartland, Donetsk Oblast, changing jobs if it looked like the truth would emerge that he had fled exile. My grandfather excelled at welding. He visited nearby Berdyansk, a town by the sea where he met my Baba Antonina, whose family were rooted city dwellers with their own house, and she worked in an office at an enterprise and was quite adept at getting him various identity papers. They married, and he was 20 and she was 18. 1 year later, my uncle Oleg was born in Donetsk, and my mother, 4 years later, Ludmila, in Berdyansk. The town had several machine building plants, and there they lived until the middle of the Second World War. The rest of the family by now was scattered, the elder sister in one place, the young girls and mother either together with one of their brothers or other relatives. One brother, who was a land surveyor, even spent a short time in Tajikistan, but his team fortunately did make it back to Ukraine. He, quote, broke away, as one of the brothers wrote in a letter, meandered to Kazan, capital of Tatarstan, found work in Stalingrad and moved to Donetsk. Ustim, my great-grandfather, died in 1951, far away from the Vologda forests. After the Second World War, Honourable Speaker, he and his wife moved to Truskovets, Lviv Oblast, in western Ukraine, where he worked building wells in the town of Spaz. It's a cruel twist of fate, Honourable Speaker, that those such as my grandfather's family, who were exiled to northern Russia or Siberia for their resistance to collectivization and not allowed to return to their village, survived the 1930s because of this. For what unfolded in the Ukrainian villages was horrific. Collectivization was accelerated in the winter of 1930 to 31, and there was large-scale resistance. Revolts and uprisings broke out in many villages. Peasants slaughtered cattle rather than turn them over to collective farms. Draconian grain requisition quotas were set that included the confiscation of seed grain. And by early 1933, Honourable Speaker, the average peasant family, comprising 5 or 6 people, was left with 80 kilograms of grain to feed themselves. Peasants were forbidden to leave collective farms, and the Ukrainian borders were closely patrolled to prevent the starving to search for bread in neighbouring Russia. One of the worst famines in Ukrainian history that killed millions ravaged Ukraine, the Holodomor. It is one that could have been totally avoided. Collectivization and the famine genocide of 1932 to 33 destroyed the peasants of Ukraine as a social stratum. The Ukrainian village was silenced and never again rose in opposition to the Soviet regime. Ukraine had not recovered from the traumas of the 1930s, when it was plunged into the cauldron of the Second World War. It was the largest Soviet republic which the Germans occupied in full, and armies swept through it not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. The Nazi invasion and the Soviet army retreat that involved a scorched earth policy, destroying all that could not be evacuated, and included the execution of inmates in the NKVD prisons. That's what the secret police had called them. The German retreat that left yet another trail of destruction, and the retaking of the country by the Soviet forces. Not once, but twice, the mere fact that my grandfather was a welder saved his life and the lives of his family. Forced labor, some more often called slave labor, work camps were the destination for my family. The war was characterized by unheard-of brutalities outside the field of battle. During the occupation, some 5 million civilians were killed, of whom over 600,000 were Jews. 1.4 million military personnel either perished on the fronts or died as prisoners of war. Every 3rd man in the Red Army was lost, compared to 1 in every 20 in the British Army. Altogether, 6.8 million people and 2 million citizens of the Republic were sent to Germany as Ostarbeiter, forced labor. Stalin's appalling unpreparedness to fight the war has been well documented, Honourable Speaker. He pinned all his hopes on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The Germans invaded the USSR on June the 22nd, 1941. By October, Donetsk Oblast was taken, They confronted an army that was poorly led during the 1936 to 38 purges. 60% of army commanders from the corps to brigade level had either been executed or died in prison camps. The dispirited troops were quickly encircled and surrendered, only to die as prisoners of war. My grandfather, Alexander, was in the Donetsk region digging anti-tank ditches when the German army and the German war machine shattered the Soviet army. He survived and walked to Berdyansk, where his family lived. Once he told my uncle Bogdan about his experience. He straggled through battlefields with thousands upon thousands of corpses strewn across the landscape, with wounded soldiers in agony breathing their last breath. He arrived in Berdyansk, bedraggled, emaciated, and in shock. While he knocked on the door, his wife did not recognize him. My grandfather, like others, did not know what to expect. His brother Vasil, the engineer, and 3 of the elder girls had already been taken by Germans as Ostarbeiter. When it became known that the German advance in Russia was stopped and they would retreat in the face of superior Soviet forces, my grandfather knew that the steppes of Ukraine would once more become a bloody battlefield. So he loaded the family on a wagon. He was just 28, his wife 26, with 2 children, my uncle, who was 7, that's Uncle Oleg, and my mother, just 2 years old. And with a cow in tow, said goodbye to his parents, promising to return soon, and headed to no particular destination, just west, somewhere out of the way, spot so that the fronts coming to and fro would pass. My grandfather's welding skills provided the livelihood as they meandered and ended up in Slovakia. There, the Germans took them as forced labor. My grandfather to work repairing rail cars, and my grandmother as a highly exploited agricultural laborer with 2 children to take care of. The end of the war found them in the American zone of southern Germany. Otherwise, they would have been sent back to Ukraine, as 3 of his sisters were. From Germany, they moved to France and then to Canada. When the casualties of the revolutionary period, collectivization, famine, the purges, and the Second World are combined, more than half of the men and a quarter of the female population of the Ukraine perished. The survival rate of those who had been marked as enemies of the people was even lower. My grandfather was indeed one of the fortunate ones. It's hard to believe, one of the fortunate ones. He did return to the Ukraine. By then in retirement, after his wife, my Baba, had died, he completed a theological degree at the Ukrainian Orthodox St. Andrew's College Faculty of Theology at the University of Manitoba and became an Orthodox priest. And with his eldest son, Diako Oleg, also an Orthodox priest, they visited the native village and held a memorial service, Honourable Speaker, for all of the departed souls from his family, my family, and the rest in Ukraine. That, Honourable Speaker, is my family's story before, during, and after the Holodomor. And my family is only one of millions of Ukrainians who experienced the same. Through the passage of this bill, as has been done in the federal parliament, as well as the provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec, we say that we remember and that we memorialize the memory of the millions who died in Holodomor. Today, we can only imagine the atrocities experienced by the people of Ukraine. And while our memories fade with time, let us collectively say, never again.
Dr. Andrew Weaver on the passage of Bill M-225, the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act. Ukrainians around the world have for years been observing the 4th Saturday in November as a day to commemorate the victims of the Holodomor famine genocide of 1932-33. Now in British Columbia, it is an official Memorial Day enshrined in law. We will bring you more from this momentous occasion in our special Holodomor Remembrance program later this month. Meanwhile, here is the Luna Ensemble once again, and some members of the audience, with Vichnaya Pamyat, Memory Eternal. And this year, on Saturday, November 3rd, the 4th Saturday of the month, please remember to light a candle at 4 p.m. and place it in a window in memory of the victims of the Holodomor. Годину була з вами Павліна. Нагадую, ви слухаєте радіопрограму «Наш Холос» радіо нашого коріння на хвилі CHLY 101.7 FM у місті Nanaimo. Залишайтеся з нами наступну годину. Далі передаю мікрофону Оксані. Запрошую послухати трохи про історію і традиції, розповість Оксана. Але перед тим я хочу залишити вас такими словами мудрості. Правда по собі блудів не залишає. And our proverb of the week translates as, truth does not leave mistakes in its wake. And that brings us to the end of the first hour of Nash Holos Ukrainian Roots Radio here on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Please stay with us as Oksana takes over the microphone to host the next hour. Meanwhile, please join me here again next Wednesday from 11 a.m. till 12 noon. And until then, do stay in touch with both Oksana and me via our Facebook page and Twitter. In between broadcasts, please visit us online where you'll find transcripts, audio archives, and information about the show, as well as a link to the podcast, and that is at www.nashholos.com. So stay tuned next for the Nash Holos Ukrainian Hour with Oksana, followed by Wellness Wednesday to learn how to be healthy naturally. And at 2 p.m., join Gord Bibby for 2 hours of great oldies on Groovin' with Bibby G. I'm Pavlina. Thanks so much for listening. Do zустрічі.
Сурмани вішали на гак, глянувши востаннє на цей світ біленький, у смертну годину козак мовив так: хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Як вороги кляті нас на кіл саджали, як живцем палили, у смолі пекли. Козаки у хата життя не благали, про долю країни думи їх були. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Щоб раділи люди, дай Бог їм останні ці слова сказать. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки.
Хай ніколи не побачить сонця той, хто зрадить батьківщину. І як тайно першому вбивці на землі ніколи не було, нема і не буде прощення. Хай так не буде прощення і тим, хто заради лакомства проклятого вбив у серці своїм волелюбний дух народу нашого, зрадив мову, відзирався віри